Hey man, I need to tell you something that most men don't realize until they're already destroyed. You think heartbreak happens in an instant, like she cheats, she leaves, she blocks you, and boom, it's over. You think the breaking point is obvious, dramatic, something you'd see coming from a mile away, but that's not how it works. The real damage starts way before that. It starts with tiny cracks she puts in your self-worth, disguised as jokes, feedback, constructive criticism. It starts with subtle shifts in her energy that make you question yourself. It starts with patterns so quiet, so gradual, that you don't even realize you're being broken until you look in the mirror one day and don't recognize the man staring back. This isn't about the moment she walked out. This is about the months, maybe years, of slow psychological erosion that happened before that moment even became possible. She doesn't announce that she's breaking you. She doesn't sit you down and say, "I'm going," to test your limits until you crumble. No, it happens through silence, through withdrawal, through comparison and criticism wrapped in concern. And by the time you realize what's happening, you've already become someone you don't respect, someone who lives for her approval, someone who's lost the very foundation of who he used to be. That's the real danger. Not the obvious betrayal, but the invisible breaking that happens one compromise at a time. Let me show you exactly how this works, because once you see the pattern, you'll recognize it everywhere, including in your own life. It begins innocently enough. She makes a comment about how you dress. Why don't you dress more like him? Or she questions a decision you made. Are you sure that's the right move? Or she compares you to someone else in a way that's supposed to sound helpful, but leaves you feeling smaller. And instead of holding your ground, instead of recognizing this as a test of your frame, you adjust, you change your clothes, you second guess your decision. You start wondering if maybe she's right and you need to improve. You think you're being a good partner, you think you're growing, you think compromise is what mature people do. But what you're actually doing is showing her something dangerous. Her validation matters more to you than your own principles. And once that door is open, she walks right through it with more critiques. Your goals, your boundaries, your energy, your friends, your time. All fair game now, all open for negotiation. All things you'll slowly surrender because you've already established the pattern. Every time you absorb her criticism without pushback, she learns one thing. You can be bent, and once she knows you bend, she starts applying pressure. Not because she's evil, but because women are wired to test men. They test to see if you'll break. They push to find where your limits actually are. And if those limits don't exist, if you keep adjusting to make her happy, she doesn't feel safe. She feels in control, and a woman who feels in control of a man cannot respect him. Now pay attention, because what I'm about to explain is the weapon she uses most often, and most men never see it coming until they're already destroyed by it. The most brutal form of psychological control isn't loud. It doesn't look like screaming or fighting or dramatic confrontation. It looks like silence. She suddenly becomes less affectionate, less invested, less present. You ask what's wrong and she says, nothing. But everything about her has changed. The warmth is gone. The enthusiasm has disappeared. And you're left in this space of uncertainty, wondering what you did wrong. That silence, it eats you alive. It makes you overthink. It makes you question yourself. It makes you replay every conversation, every action, looking for the thing that triggered her withdrawal. And that's exactly what it's designed to do. This is psychological warfare, brother. She wants to see how you respond to her pulling away. She wants to know if you'll chase, if you'll beg, if you'll crumble into anxiety and start doing anything to get her affection back. Because a man who can be shaken by a woman's silence is not the kind of man she can truly admire. He might be someone she keeps around. He might be someone she uses for validation or security. But deep down, she loses respect for him the moment he shows emotional instability in response to her emotional control. So she withdraws, and you chase. And she learns that she controls the thermostat of the relationship. She decides when it's warm, she decides when it's cold, and you become the one standing outside the door, hoping she'll let you back in. That's not partnership, that's slow erosion, and most men don't realize they're in it until they've completely lost themselves. Here's another tactic that breaks men, and this one is particularly dangerous because it uses your best qualities against you. She opens up about her past, the ex who hurt her, the father who abandoned her, the trauma she carries from childhood, and you, being the good man you want to be, feel called to protect her, to heal her, to prove that you're not like the others. But that's the trap. Now you walk on eggshells trying not to trigger her. Now you stay when you should leave because you don't want to abandon her like everyone else did. Now you pause your boundaries because she's crying and you feel guilty for having standards. Her wounds become a leash around your loyalty. She knows, consciously or not, that if she cries, you'll soften. If she mentions her trauma, you'll back down. If she makes you feel like you're adding to her pain by holding your line, you'll drop your line entirely. And in that pause, she pushes further. She tests harder. She breaks you, not by force, but through your own compassion. You think you're being loving, you think you're being patient, but what you're actually doing is teaching her that her emotional leverage works, that she can use her pain to control your behavior, that your desire to heal her is more powerful than your commitment to yourself. What I'm about to tell you next explains how men wake up one day completely unrecognizable to themselves, and why it happens so gradually that you never see it coming. Women break men by making them question their instincts. You say no to something. She pouts. You say, not today. She accuses you of being distant. You hold a boundary. She tells you you're being cold, selfish, or unloving. And over time, you stop saying no. You stop enforcing your line. You slowly become her yes man, not because she demanded it, but because you didn't want to upset her, because the cost of peace seemed lower than the cost of conflict. That's how it works. Not all at once, but gradually. Like a frog in boiling water, you don't notice the heat rising until it's too late. Every small compromise feels reasonable in the moment. Every boundary you lower seems like no big deal at the time, but they add up. And one day you realize you've stopped seeing your friends, you've stopped pursuing your goals, you've stopped having opinions that differ from hers, you've stopped being you. And the worst part, she'll act confused when you finally break. She'll say, you've changed. But the truth is, you didn't change. You were drained of your essence, drained of your standards, drained of your masculinity. And it all started the second you let her test your foundation without holding the line. Her tests aren't random emotional flares. They're designed, consciously or unconsciously, to evaluate your strength of mind. She'll push your limits with mood swings, with silent treatments, with flirtatious behavior around other men, not because she wants to cheat, not because she wants to hurt you, but because she wants to see how you react. Will you become insecure, possessive? Will you start begging for reassurance? Will you lose your cool and react emotionally? The moment you do any of those things, she sees you as a man who cannot lead himself. And if you can't lead yourself, you sure as hell can't lead a relationship. That's where the psychological breakdown starts, one piece at a time. Your energy weakens, your inner voice goes quiet, and her voice takes over. Her opinions, her preferences, her moods, all dictating how you show up in your own life. She becomes the sun you orbit instead of the planet that orbits you. Now here's the part most men are afraid to admit, because once you see it, you can't unsee how complicit you've been in your own breaking. Sometimes you're not just being broken, you're helping her do it. You want her to be happy, you want her to feel loved, so you sacrifice, you submit, you soften, not because she explicitly asked, but because you thought that's what a good man does. You stop hanging with your friends because she seemed uncomfortable with it. You stop pursuing your goals because they took time away from her. You stop holding her accountable because the conversations were uncomfortable. You silence your needs just to keep the peace. And in doing that, you become the kind of man even you don't respect. A man who lives for her emotional weather instead of his own internal compass. A man who adjusts his truth based on how she might react. That's how it happens, brother. Not in one explosion, but in 1,000 tiny cuts until one day you wake up and you're gone. The worst part is that she didn't force any of it. You gave it freely. You volunteered your boundaries. You handed over your power, one compromise at a time, hoping it would make her love you more. But it didn't. It made her respect you less. Here's what most men don't understand until it's too late. A woman doesn't have to physically cheat to betray you. Sometimes the betrayal is psychological, emotional, energetic. It's in the way she praises other men more than you. It's in the way she subtly compares your flaws to the strengths of guys you don't even know. It's in the way she makes you feel like nothing you do is quite enough. And over time, this wears down your inner confidence. Not because you've actually changed, but because you begin to see yourself through her distorted lens. That's the power of psychological warfare. It reframes your self-image, it rewrites your identity, and unless you snap out of it, you'll start playing a role that was never yours. A role where you're always behind, always reaching, always apologizing for being you. She'll use your reactions against you too. She'll provoke you, push buttons, withdraw affection, flirt with boundaries, and the moment you react, she acts like you're the unstable one. Why are you so sensitive? I was just joking. You're overreacting. This is gaslighting. It's designed to make you doubt your own emotional intelligence, to make you police yourself, to make you wonder if maybe you're the problem, but you're not. You're responding to real disrespect, real boundary violations, real psychological pressure, and if she can get you to silence that inner alarm just to keep her around, then she owns your mind, not through force, but through doubt. Now let me explain why she does this, because understanding the why changes everything about how you respond. The deeper reason women test men psychologically isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's evolutionary, instinctual. She wants to know if you're as strong as you say you are, not when things are easy, but when she's difficult, when she's unpredictable, when she's cold. If your masculinity crumbles in the presence of feminine chaos, she knows she can't trust you with her safety. That's the paradox. She breaks you to see if you break. Every mood swing, every passive-aggressive silence, every "I don't know what I want" moment, it's a filter. She's asking, can you handle me at my worst without becoming less of a man? And if your answer is to shrink, to react, to chase, or to over-explain, you fail. Not because you're a bad person, but because you're unproven. Only the man who remains centered, not reactive, not explosive, not spineless, earns her primal respect. The man who sees through the game, who knows her chaos isn't personal, it's primal, and instead of folding, he stands tall, he breathes slower, he watches more than he speaks. That silence, that stillness, drives her crazy in the best possible way, because deep down, every woman craves a man she can't shake, a man who won't crumble just because she's having a hard day, a man whose center holds even when she's spinning. But make no mistake, if you let her break you once, she will do it again. Not because she's trying to destroy you, but because she's looking for the edge of your strength. She wants to know how far she can push before you snap, and once she finds that threshold, she owns it. Now let me show you how to protect yourself, not by avoiding women, but by becoming unbreakable. So how do you protect yourself from psychological erosion? Not by hating women, not by becoming cold or bitter, but by mastering yourself. You make your validation internal, not external. You stop needing her approval to feel good about who you are. You stop adjusting your behavior based on her moods. You set emotional boundaries that don't bend just because she's beautiful, sad, or seductive. You understand that your peace is your power, and any woman who costs you that peace is too expensive to keep. You don't need to yell, you don't need to fight, you just need to observe. Watch how she responds when you say no. Watch how she acts when you take space. Watch how she treats you when you're no longer trying to impress her. That's where the truth lives. Not in her words, but in her reactions. The man with boundaries doesn't need to explain himself. He doesn't need to negotiate. He simply walks away from what doesn't feel right, and that calm refusal, that's the most psychologically disruptive thing you can do to a woman who's trying to test your limits. Because she expects resistance, she expects emotional pushback, but what she can't handle is your indifference, your silent departure, your calm, unshakable stillness. That's when her respect begins. Not when you chase, not when you explain, but when she realizes she can't move you. There's a version of you that she respects, and a version she manipulates. The difference? Boundaries. Not fake, forced boundaries you bring up when you're angry. Real ones. the kind that live in your energy, your posture, your decisions. A man with true boundaries doesn't announce them, he embodies them. He doesn't need to fight for respect, he commands it through presence. He's the man who can love without losing himself, who can give without surrendering his edge, who can hold space for her emotions, without abandoning his vision. That man doesn't get broken, he gets chased. You'll know you've passed her tests when her chaos starts to soften around you, when she stops needing to provoke because she knows you won't bite, when she respects your silence more than she loved your attention. That's the reward for not letting her break you. Not that she becomes easier, but that she starts trusting you deeply, because women don't trust men who crumble under pressure. They trust men who remain. The man who doesn't need her validation, the man who doesn't fear her moods, the man who doesn't lose himself trying to save her from herself. That man becomes her anchor, her obsession, her craving, not because he chased her, but because she couldn't move him. So if you've been broken, if you've lost yourself trying to love a woman who made you doubt your worth, don't stay down, rebuild. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. Learn the lessons, feel the pain, but don't let it turn you cold. Let it sharpen you. Let it remind you that you are not here to be tested, twisted, and tamed. You are here to lead, to center, to command. The moment you stop reacting to her chaos and start radiating your truth, that's the moment everything changes. She'll either rise to meet you or fade into the noise. Either way, you win. Because the man who refuses to be broken becomes the man no woman ever forgets. He's not the man who chased her. He's not the man who begged her to stay. He's not the man who bent every time she pushed. He's the man who stood still, who breathed through the storm, who watched her chaos without becoming part of it. He's the man who knows that his peace is more valuable than her approval, that his center is more important than her comfort, that his self-respect is the foundation everything else is built on. And when she finally sees that, when she realizes she cannot move him, cannot manipulate him, cannot break him, something shifts. She stops testing. She starts trusting. She stops pushing, she starts following, she stops trying to break him and starts wondering how she can stay close to the only man who ever passed every test she threw at him. That's the man you're becoming. That's the man who walks away from this understanding not broken, but forged. That's the man who refuses to be bent, shaped, or eroded by anyone who hasn't earned the right to even stand in his presence. And that man, that unshakable, centered, grounded man, becomes unforgettable. Not because he was perfect, but because he could not be moved.